Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Coffee and Trek. I mean, the Warp Core podcast. I am UrzaMaster. Joining me as always, Fert Derby and Lord Uther. Gentlemen, welcome back to Starfleet Academy, Starfleet Headquarters. However you see it, we are revisiting the third season of NCC 1701, the original series of Star Trek. And today's episode is another one of those Season 3 bangers. For the world is hollow and I have touched the sky. I don't want to give anything away, so I'm going to turn it right over to Fert Derby. Fert Derby, tell us a little bit more about this entry in Season 3.
Thank you, UrzaMaster. Thank you, Lord Uther. Thanks, Warp Core fans who are tuning in with some frequency to our varied and very many Warp Core podcasts. We thank you and we encourage you to keep watching. And to slip across the aisle and check out our Star Wars podcast as well, The Graying Jedi. You'll find all your favorite sci-fi franchise content right here at Pending Rebrand. And what a doozy we have for you today. The title's a mouthful. I'm going to give it to you one more time. For the world is hollow, and I have touched the sky. Yes, they actually had to reduce the credits font in this episode in such a lovely shade of blue in order to be able to fit all of that. For the record, the episode does use that mouthful quote a couple of times, actually, just in case you missed it. You were getting your popcorn or your beverages and you weren't there when the first shots of the episode started. That would have been on November 8th, 1968. Which was probably, I didn't look this up exactly, but the first week of November 1968, there would have been a presidential election. We would have had Richard Nixon assuming office following LBJ deciding not to run for another term. So a lot of political news, Vietnam still raging. We were a summer away from a moonshot. So again, the Beatles are everywhere and they're doing drugs now in Sgt. Pepper's. So these are, when you see all those cliched miniseries and so forth about, do you remember the 1960s? The 1960s are happening right now as For the World is Hollow and I Have Touched the Sky beams into living rooms all across the country. We have some new people working, as I threatened. We've lost our core group of Star Trek veterans behind the camera and at the keyboards, with the exception of Gene Roddenberry, who will pop up from time to time. These are names that, again, they're just getting their shot, and you're going to see some of them are going to hit the bullseye, and some of them are going to stick in the waitress's thigh as she walks by with a thing of drinks. On our way to various tables. Tony Leader is our director. He worked in television, did a good job, worked on Leave It to Beaver, Rawhide, Lost in Space, Gilligan's Island, and The Virginian. And our writer is credited as Rick Volyarts. It was actually short for Henrik Volyarts. And he actually wrote for Frank Sinatra's radio program. So back when those things were swinging and hipping and happening. So anyways, as Frank was coming up, a tough kid from New Jersey, from Hoboken, he had a very popular radio show, and that's where Rick got his start. But he also worked in TV. He too worked in Leave It to Beaver, Rawhide, Wagon Train, Highway Patrol, and Death Valley Days. So, again, we're talking about people who have cut their teeth in the industry, and for them, Star Trek was a job. It wasn't a passion. It wasn't, they woke up and said, I want to one day tell the stories of Klingons and Romulans and Ferengi. This was a gig. And they had to be there at Monday at 8 a.m. on the Paramount lot, and then they were done, a week from Friday at 5 o'clock, and it was time for drinks. And there's a certain amount of professionalism there and a certain amount of, okay, just stick to it. but at the same breath, some of that real excitement, perhaps, those people who started in season 1 where they wanted to tell big, bold science fiction stories, and Roddenberry's mandate was, let's go out and get, Ray Bradbury and Isaac Asimov and all these guys to write for us. It's I think you see from the quality of some of the episodes, it really is more of a 9 to 5. Like, all right, that's a wrap. See you all tomorrow. So forth. So let's take this episode, for example. An episode that, once again, I'm not going to sit here and crucify and grab pitchforks and torches and say it's a terrible episode of Star Trek. It's not. It's not a terrible episode of Star Trek, maybe in the writer's room, or even as they start to, embark on their vision for its, 2-week shoot. But it has some of the same problems that we've already seen in earlier episodes, not the least of which is just lifting some elements from earlier episodes. In fact, episodes that we just talked about here on the Warp Core 5 episodes ago. Goodness. Here we are on Warp Core 73 this week. You can go not very far back. You can go back to Warp Core 68 if you like for the Paradise Syndrome, in which several of this episode's key hallmarks, at least there may not be outright lifted, but there are strong similarities in their DNA, enough that it makes you question, who's the one who ultimately said, yeah, let's move forward. Particularly the notion that an asteroid is threatening a living species and needs to be diverted, destroyed, or otherwise inconvenienced. Now, this one actually suggests, wait, there's a whole society living in this rock, and we can't just vaporize it and split it into billions of granules. I'm reminded, actually, I believe Star Trek Strange New Worlds handled this as well years later in the franchise. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, what a great moral dilemma. What do we do? These people, this is their home. We can't destroy it. Yet if we don't do something, they're going to, cause the deaths of countless innocent lives. And I thought, at the time, I'm like, wow, what a great thing for a Trek, a moral question that they need to wrestle with. They didn't really do that here, and that's fine. But at the same time, we had other elements of this episode. We learn in the teaser that Dr. McCoy is dying of a previously unannounced, autoimmune deficiency, low platelet blood count, what have you, that gobbledygook. And, even Nurse Chapel's back, is distraught by the diagnosis. So we have McCoy, a great showcase vehicle for Leonard Bones McCoy, DeForest Kelley. And we give him a love interest, just like, James Kirk got bonked with a laser ray and lost his memory and went native, literally. Here's McCoy finding a cute suitor on this planet, this asteroid, the civilization embedded in the asteroid that doesn't know that they're on an asteroid, and says, hey, I've only got one life to live and it's going to run out next year, so why don't I take a chance on romance and see where it takes me? Roll the dice, so to speak. The problem is all these other elements are kind of crowding around it. Again, the asteroid question, McCoy's illness. And I really, as much as I wanted this episode to give DeForest Kelley the room, the emotional room to grow and be a part of this, to this viewer, I felt like all of the decisions made with regards to the courtship and the presumed marriage and all of that, it was because the writers had said, this is what we want to do. It didn't feel very organic. And I don't blame DeForest Kelley. I don't feel like he was giving something insincere. I don't think that they emotionally sculpted it in a way that I bought into. as silly as it was to see Kirk running around in Native American leathers, I halfway kind of bought that hey, you know what? I'm totally into this woman, and we're going to design an irrigation system for the future and be together. Like, Shatner, in his overarching acting style, at least halfway made me think, okay, fine, I get it. I think it's dumb, but I'm going with it. And I think here, DeForest Kelley played it somewhat reserved, as he was like to do. We've seen the Southern gentleman. We've seen him at his flirty best in prior seasons. But I didn't think that I wasn't feeling the character like commit to this. It was more like, well, I'm going to die. I mean, I guess, I don't want to die lonely and unhappy. It just, the romance never really got beyond second gear. And again, we're talking about a network television show in 1968. Granted, I wasn't looking for rip off his shirt, 9.5 weeks, Adrian Lynn love scenes. But I wanted to feel that emotional connection. Think of Kirk and Edith Keeler in The City on the Edge of Forever. I mean, I never thought that the writers gave DeForest Kelley in this that one spark, that one scene where I was just like, yes, I totally think McCoy should stay with her and abandon the Enterprise crew. It just felt a little arbitrary, like, okay, we need McCoy to want to not leave. So he tells them, I'm not going, Jim, kind of a thing. On the same breath, I thought they handled the whole Spock finding out that McCoy is, terminal, and Jim, saying he wouldn't have wanted to told you, or he didn't tell you, but I'm going to. And then when McCoy comes to after getting bonked in the head or collapsing, he's just like, he knows. And a great, 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 great moment for the three leads there. So, I mean, in terms of just because what's said or not said, and you can actually go back to Star Trek V, again, a much maligned entry in the feature film franchise, but not without its merits, as we've discovered here on the Warp Core. And so I got a little forward echo of their interaction and camaraderie going up to that 1989 Shatner directed picture. And those are the highlights, right? But in the same breath, we have weird dressed aliens again, and we have high priestesses, and we have the talking computer or whatever that isn't really resolved. And then once we get past, the microwave heat rays, and Spock, my favorite is as they grab the book with all the forbidden knowledge in it, and Kirk makes sure that the audience knows, he's like, is that indexed? Spock's like, yes, of course. Like, so he doesn't have to sit there and read the book in 26 seconds to find what he needs. Oh, it's indexed helpfully right here. To move the temple, obelisk 26A, and goes through it. I thought that was hysterical. It's a relatively simple fix. Put two Starfleet guys behind the computer panel. What do you think, Spock? Yeah, I'll just realign that. Replace a circuit, and hey, we're good, Jim. So that was, a little too neat and tidy. And just like our Klingons, chasing off the intruder last week, Day of the Dove, with laughter and joviality and hilarity, we're left with a lot of questions at the end of this episode. I was, at least, like, are they going to wake up everybody else on the asteroid? Are they going to take those obedience chips out of their necks so that they all now know, where they are and what their place in the universe is? Jim's like, hey, when that asteroid makes a right turn, Bones, we can get you back there. Like, the episode ended with just as many questions as it started, and I don't know what the Trek team was just thinking, like, we'll just leave it up to their imagination. And that's like, great, but it's just a little, or we don't really need to answer those questions. Go to credits. So those were sort of my initial thoughts. It was a little frustrating just because I just felt like, did you guys really, again, sort of even attempt to tie everything up into some sort of bow for us? And I don't think that they did. And so those were my glancing notes there. And my favorite line, Does McCoy find me attractive? I always like it when other people speak in the third person, sort of awkwardly. It just had this very robotic, like, does McCoy find me attractive? Yes. I half expected him to say McCoy finds you hot. So those are where we are there. But what do you guys think of a very long titled episode?
Yeah, boy, you brought up a lot of good points. I think you're right. It's not the worst episode.
No.
It's not the best episode. There were definitely things that were rehashed, but done okay. There were some really good parts of this episode, and then there was a lot of convenient writing, which kind of reminds me a bit of the Lower Decks concept of second contact, where they go back to the one planet where they had the bewitching hour, and they've decided to go back to following the computer again. It makes me wonder, like, did they take that from this episode? Because that's hysterical. And I think, the whole problem with this episode is the convenience. It's the convenient resolution. It's the convenient cure of McCoy's illness. It's sort of the convenient out for McCoy to do something selfless, which is to get them the information they need. I took it as he's sacrificing himself because he knows he has a year. He's like, I found an inn. I can get them the information. They can solve this. If it costs my life, so what? I'm going to die anyway. Which I also think, if that's the route they were going to go, could have been more successful. And no, I don't think it's on DeForest Kelley. I think it's just kind of the 9 to 5 writers. They needed to put out an episode. It was putting out. It wasn't making love.
Right.
It was really just functional, and it was okay. Like, I think about some of the media we get today, or the many, many, many episodes of Law and Order, right? They are all the same. It is absolutely a 9 to 5. Occasionally you get one that's really good, like the episode with Tim Curry, or you get, kind of some stinkers in there, like most of the other episodes are all the same. And yes, I'm going to shit on Law and Order again. You're welcome. But I did like this episode. I thought there was a lot of good stuff, especially with our big three. And that's, if there's anything that I think keeps Star Trek alive after this original series wrap up, it's the big three, and it's some of the big moments, because we still have some pretty historically significant moments coming up in season 3 we haven't gotten to yet, which put Star Trek on the map. There are a couple episodes coming up that people remember this whole series for just moments of those episodes, not the whole episode. One of which is like television history. So that, I think, is pretty compelling. If you think about, so far this is clearly the weakest of the 3 seasons. Probably going to continue on that trend. But it's also probably one of the most impactful. And it could be of the era that this was the kind of television that fell in line with the groovy altered states that it just worked. And maybe now, through the lens of looking back, it's like, oof, Jesus, isn't nearly as good as the first 2 seasons. Well, drop some acid and maybe you'll think differently. I mean, but I do think that, and I was thinking about this as you were describing the episode. There's one episode I don't think any Star Trek series has done. I think Lower Decks kind of pokes fun at it. But it's something that I think you could go to any of these Star Trek series, and it would make a very interesting episode. I think especially Next Gen. But original series too is like, there's no episode where nothing happens. There's no Waiting for Godot episode where it's just the crew going about their regular duties. They're scanning a nebula, let's say. Something very normal that the Enterprise does all the time, and nothing happens. It's just character-driven story, where it's, oh, you just got back from shore leave, Worf. Where did you go? I returned to Quonos and bought myself a new bat'leth. Oh, that's it? You didn't get in any fist fights or anything? No, it was very drama-free. Like he talks like Richard Nixon, apparently. But I think that would make such an awesome episode. Just a regular nondescript, like, Lieutenant Dax goes and, has a beer at the bar and sweet talks somebody that she doesn't hook up with. Like, I mean, it's just like stuff like that where it's like Dax had some strikeouts. Quark actually made money without any kind of fight or consequences. Odo busted a bad guy who just like shoplifted and it was nothing to write home about. Like, those episodes, where are they? Because that is the Star Trek that we've not seen of all. And I was running down the list. Like, there's some very regular, like, crew members' birthday type episodes, but, Picard Day is maybe one of them. But stuff always goes off the rails. There's always some drama, always some conflict. Yes, I know you kind of need that for a story. But what about a story that just lacks that, but still delivers something interesting, moves canon forward? You get that character to character interaction, which is so very core Star Trek. I want to see that. This episode kind of makes me want that because it's almost there. It is almost a very routine first contact mission outside of some kind of unsuccessful consequences that happen. Like, oh, we got to recalibrate this computer that's trying to zap us. Well, we're just going to kind of deal with it and do it. Like, okay.
Right.
There's really not a lot of consequence there. There's no red shirt that dies. There's no, like, love interest that sacrifices herself and then dies permanently. And they're like, well, she's dead. And then they all jet and everything's okay. I want to see Kirk, McCoy, and Spock just like doing their daily stuff, going to the mess hall, not even eating with each other, like going to the mess hall at separate times because that's how their schedules worked out. And just like, where are the cups of coffee in this season? Like, they were all over season 2. Nobody drinks coffee anymore in season 3. Like, what happened? I want to see Uhura like tuning up her harp, and maybe Spock going for a LARP. All these things that I think, and this is where Strange New Worlds is kind of itching at the surface of this sometimes, because they give us a lot of that to sort of supplement the one main story arc, because it's very one character story arcs, which is why that series is great, because it tells you these two characters are having a tit for tat this episode, but we still got to incorporate all these other people we're paying money for. Please give us more Rebecca Romaine this season. I just feel like, gosh, this would be such a cool concept they haven't done yet. And so if there's one real big, great takeaway of this episode of Star Trek, because I don't think there's a lot you could say, wow, that's really great. It's the inspiration to do an episode where nothing happens. It's a show about nothing.
Yeah, at this point it feels like they're just churning out shows, right? It's almost like, I got to get this done. Hence the really quick endings to these shows. It's like it's not thought out properly, which goes back to our conversation last week about, how do you, put together an episode? What does it look like? It's interesting you talk about a regular day in the life of. I kind of felt like that's what Data's day was on Next Gen. It kind of followed that. That's one of the reasons why I really liked that episode, was just Data narrating himself through a day of his life, in a sense, on board the Enterprise. But yeah, I think those pieces are important. And again, to your point about Strange New Worlds, I think that's what helps us love those characters, is we're getting those intimate moments or those alone times where they're sorting things out, or you're just getting to see them almost on a personal level, and that kind of attaches yourself to those characters a little bit more. I also feel like in this season we are in the throes of Shatner's overacting constantly, consistently, each episode. We're starting to see more and more of that. Again, is he bored at this point? Like, where is this coming from? What's this motivation for the overacting? I've never figured that out with him. Here's a question. I guess this is like a TV movie. Why do almost every episode, why do you have to have a love interest? Why can't you just get through an episode without that? So what are your thoughts on that? Why are we, I think I know the reasoning why behind a love interest, but why do they feel like they always have to go there? Even now, I think we see that too, right? Why the love interest?
Sex sells. No. again,
That might be part of it.
if I'm in the whiteboard room, and someone says, "Hey, let's marry off McCoy," and but he's got like a disease and he's only got a year to live, I'm not saying, "Don't put that up there. That's stupid." I just like we talked about. I don't know that they went through all 12 steps of, okay, so what does that look like and how does that end? With Kirk, we usually kill off, so he can be a widower or something. So we
Right.
have to have entanglements. I think, I mean, the traditional family unit was very much alive and well in the 1950s. It had some coarsening and straining in the 60s, obviously, but for most people, it's up. Got to find myself a wife, house in the suburbs, 2-car garage, etc. It's 2.5 kids. So I feel like whether it was Star Trek, Mannix, or Alice, the sitcom, like you had to have some sort of, you know, inter interspecies gender, like, hey, that's a cute waiter over there, or hey, that suspect, do I trust her? She might be a killer. So I just think that was just how people thought it. The idea of a show about nothing, the Seinfeld of Star Trek, if you will. God, I love Seinfeld. I like it. I like it even if what they end up encountering, they're scanning the nebula, even if there is like, we've got asteroid particles, we've got to raise the shields. I mean, you can make sort of low key things happen and still be interesting. And I think I was thinking about this before. I mean, just having Captain Pike cooking in the kitchen, that says we don't sit there and do a Food Network show. Hey, what's he making tonight? What ingredients is he using? But just to see the visual and have a scene playing out as he's chopping up vegetables or steaming, meats, like that tells us a heck of a lot about him, or at least we get to fill in some blanks as an audience member without having to sit there and go through a lengthy, like, now I'm going to take the lentils and, drain them for 5 minutes. So, yes, I don't think I don't think in the networks, time is money, we're on the tick. I don't think that ever occurred to them to be able to give that kind of space, or that they thought the audiences would engage with that. Hey, this is Star Trek. I want to see aliens and laser beams and beautiful exotic women. I think that's what, everyone was tuning in for. But now that we're several decades past and we can do these things, yes, absolutely. An episode where Uhura and Spock are just doing, taking requests, in the 10 Forward Lounge or whatever they were calling it originally. Yes, and more yes. And if you're listening, Paramount, please work that into seasons 3 and 4 of Strange New Worlds. Give the audience what they want. More shows about nothing.
Nothing. You could even have Jerry Seinfeld on that episode. I'm sure he'd do it.
I'm sure.
What else is he doing?
He's a Star Trek fan.
Drinking
Really
coffee?
good, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just interesting. Having a love interest. It's sort of the cheap, kind of like wrestling has cheap heat or cheap pop. It's the cheap pop of any television series, is having that special guest star love interest. I mean, even Just Shoot Me did it, So they had one-off shows like that, and it's not bad. It doesn't
Oh, I'm
always
not
come
saying
off
it's
as
bad.
super
Yeah, I'm just
successful.
trying to figure out what the thought process is.
I think the thought probably at the time was that, the shtick that's going to sell this time slot is we got to have a beautiful woman. Because they probably were thinking their demographics primarily men, because that's primarily who everybody marketed to in the 60s. That or, upper crust type women who are interested in probably not Star Trek. But, I think the beauty of having that love interest episode is you can have a love interest for anybody. and that means you get to pull that character into the mix, and that's where we get this ensemble cast that everybody comes to love, right? Like, we love Sulu, we love Chekhov, we love Uhura, we love, obviously Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. That's the three main characters, but we also love Scotty. Everybody loves Scotty, and that's the thing, is like, occasionally you have to bring those in. So to give like McCoy a love interest, or Scotty a love interest, or Sulu a love interest, or Chekhov, maybe don't give Chekhov love interest, because he's very creepy about it. Yeah. Or at least he was written that way. But I think it's just an interesting selling point. I think Next Gen did it better, because Next Gen and DS9 in particular, and Voyager to some extent, like, they were willing to kind of flirt with the boundaries of what a love interest could be, a la Riker falling in love with a genderless alien, who is obviously, I think, female leaning. They didn't want to get too wild with their NB love, but I think that it was interesting that, that tradition has kind of morphed over time and has become more reflective of modern society and culture, and that probably is what Roddenberry envisioned, is that as the times change, the storytelling is going to mimic the world around it. And, I think that's why we get some of the stories we're getting, in Strange New Worlds today. And it's entertaining. Why is it entertaining? I think because we all enjoy a good love story, or a good flirtation story, or whatever it morphs into. I really like how Lower Decks does it. Not to spoil anything, but some of the little flirty love interests that pop up on there, particularly the one scene offs, are absolutely outrageously funny. And definitely, pending rebrand fans, stay tuned to the Warp Core podcast, as eventually we are going to get to Lower Decks, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with that one. But I think the beauty of Star Trek in this season 3 is that, despite the fact we're getting these 9 to 5 writers and we're getting some of these sort of mailed in episodes, these actors are really working their tails off to sell. I think about some of the storylines that wrestling tried to tell in the early 90s. This is kind of the early 90s for Star Trek. They've got the gobbledygooker, and they're trying to figure out, like, how in the hell do we make this entertaining? Well, you introduce the Undertaker. Like, that's what you do. So, I think that there's enough promise of great Trek in these episodes that's what gives us the later animated series and the movies, and then brings Star Trek back to a new generation. So I'm hoping that as we give this a retrospective here on the Warp Core podcast, you all out there in pending rebrand land will give it a rewatch as well. Or if it's your first time, jump head first into that 5-year, 3-year mission, and tell us what you think in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification button, stay up to date with pending rebrand and the Warp Core podcast and all our other fine content. But gentlemen, we have Warp Cores to rate this episode. I know it's been difficult this season, but I feel like this episode's a little bit better than the last one. Maybe not one of the top episodes, but Lord Uther, what are you thinking? What's your Warp Core rating?
3.5. I can't. Struggle is real right now. I don't like the way these episodes are ending. I feel like, and I said it last time around, it's just kind of some lazy writing, revisiting old ideas. So I'm struggling with this season a little bit, obviously. And which brings me to what you had said, and I think it's, as always, an absolutely phenomenal point. Epic moments versus epic episodes. And to me, those are two different things. Kind of reminds me of golf. You get that one hit or that one shot that you take, right? And you're like, I can do this every time. Like, this keeps me in the game. I'll play 18 holes because I have one good swing of the club. And those epic moments that I think you're bringing up is what keep people going, kind of, through these seasons and possibly pushes you to a movie. But it's not. I'm not getting epic episodes where I feel like the first couple seasons of Next Gen, they were trying to figure it out. And then you're getting consistent epic episodes and seasons of Next Gen, and from what you two both say to me, DS9 as well, right? Like, And that's what we love about Strange New Worlds. We're getting epic episodes every time. So I'm just building on what you said. Anyway, Fert.
4. That was the perfect golf metaphor, Lord Uther. Thank you. And you actually knocked my warp cores down a quarter point when you said that, because it's a better joke when you scream 4 for a golf metaphor. Yeah,
Agreed.
this is not a 2 or a 3 or a 3 3/4, but it's also not a 5.5 or a 6, based on just the overall performance of many of our beloved Treks and so forth. So, to speak in parlance that our longtime Warp Core fans might get you, yes, it's not Who Mourns for Adonis or The Alternative Factor or Cat's Paw, but it's also not Balance of Terror, Journey to Babel, Mirror Mirror, The City on the Edge of Forever, or any of those, The Trouble with Tribbles, or any of those that are on the Mount Rushmore of original series Trek. So I think it was UrzaMaster if it said it. You know, it was a punch a time clock episode. Could have gone really terribly, but it's not going to leave a large impression unless you're a huge Bones McCoy fan, and then it's nice to see them give him the emotional focus. They could have done more, and they probably should have. But, you know, again, let's bring him forward. I love the idea. Do we get a Scotty love episode? If we haven't, let's see it in Strange New Worlds. Let's give the Scotsman somebody to wine and dine and share some FaceTime with if we haven't already.
Doesn't that happen in Star Trek V?
With
Briefly.
Uhura?
Briefly.
Yeah.
Love.
Okay, there.
Yeah.
The Love Boat. So yes, it's possible.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how the rest of the season goes. This is a 4 for me as well. I didn't hate it, but I also wasn't 100% hooked into it the entire time. It wouldn't make my list of episodes to watch for somebody who's trying to rewatch the original series and just hit the highlights. Like, this is one that's like, if you get to it, great. If not, I thought there were some great elements. The love interest was a beautiful woman, talented actress. I think she did a fine job. Really, honestly, with what they were given, I thought they did okay. It just didn't end well. It wasn't super cohesive. I would have liked to see a little more stakes involved, a little more emotional building. But again, you're talking a 9 to 5 crew. Like, this is a solid product. It's not the best product. It's kind of like anything made in the USA of the era. Solid product, not the best product. You should probably buy the Japanese. And that was Stereos in 1968. So with that, we implore you to continue to venture on with us here at the Warp Core Podcast as we push through Season 3, Star Trek, the original series. But for now, live long and prosper.